Welcome back to Refit and Sail. You may remember from an earlier video I had a problem with my windlass. This is a Lofrans Kobra that I fitted to my Westerly Sea Lord about 12 months ago now, and after about 10.5 months it stopped working, and I was a little disappointed to find that when I had a little look inside the motor around here, there's an end cap that comes off. Basically it seemed to have turned into a pile of rust, which is not ideal. So contacted Lofrans, and they spent a long time trying to explain how it was my fault that their motor isn't waterproof, but eventually they did, after many emails, send me a replacement motor, which I've got in the box here. So in this video I'm going to pull the motor off and swap it over, and hopefully refit it on the boat and be all good again. So I didn't show you removing of the windlass off the front of the boat because I didn't think that was going to be terribly interesting. It is simply 4 fixings that go through the deck and into the top of the chain locker, so that was fairly straightforward. It was pretty well stuck on with sealant, so I'm happy that it was very well sealed, which was one of the reasons Lofrans said it failed. It wasn't appropriately sealed. Well, it was, because it's pulled up some of the wood actually when I pulled the sealant off, and there's still plenty of sealant left on the deck, which I need to remove before I can glue it all back down. I think it comes off simply by undoing these 2 fixings here, which hold the motor in place. I'm going to pull the new motor out in a minute just to double check what it looks like on the inside with it removed, and also to check they've sent me the right motor. And hopefully it's just going to be a case, once it's on the bench now, of pulling that out, putting the new one in, and then it can be chucked back on the boat. But I know I tried to do this with the windlass still attached to the boat, and I was kind of trying to reach above my head through an anchor locker to pull it down, and it was just well, it was impossible for me to pull it down. So I'm hoping now it's on the desk. I can see there is a little bit of sealant that's gone between the windlass and the motor, so if I run around with a knife, hopefully I can cut that away and then pull it out. We shall see. Anyway, they have sent me a new motor, hopefully in here. Lots of packing. That looks promising. There we go. If there's anything else in there I need to be aware of. No, that's all packaging. So, Lofrans 1000 watt, 12 volt. Looks exactly the same. Should be a direct replacement, hopefully. Here you go. 1 motor. It's actually quite heavy to hold at this distance. So I'm hoping I can run around where I've got some sealant in here with the knife, and it's good sealant. Maybe I need a new blade. It's nothing more dangerous than a blunt blade. It's an often said phrase. It is so true. The number of times that I've tried to do something, I've just gone, oh, it's a bit blunt, but it'll be alright, it'll be alright, and you end up putting so much force into whatever it is you're cutting that when you slip, or if you slip, your knife goes where you don't want it normally, and at best you end up bleeding a bit. At worst you end up bleeding a lot. So I've learnt that the hard way. I don't always take my own advice. There we go. That's allowing me to cut through the sealant a bit more easily. There we go. You can see just sealant's gone up in between the motor and the housing, but that's cleared it down that side now. I mean, funnily enough, this was one of the things that I planned to do before refitting it, was to run a very small bead of sealant between the aluminium housing and the motor so that any water that gets in can't get up into the top of the motor. Although in theory this should be sealed. That looks like a waterproof, oil-proof seal on the top there. So maybe I don't need to do that after all. The water got into the motor, I think, through the bottom here on this end cap. I'll remove that end cap in a minute so we can have a better look at what the insides of the motor look like. But as I'm here wielding a knife, that peeled off a bit more easily this side. There we go. Right. I'll tell you what, before I unbolt it, let's just take this end cap off. So if we take this off, yeah, you can see there's a rubber O-ring there, and yeah, so that's kind of all the salt crystals that have collected in this little cup in the bottom. They'd have been better off, you know, not making it waterproof and just having some drain holes in there, I reckon. And that is the state of the motor. It is pretty nasty. I'll give you a close-up. So here's the bottom of the motor, having taken the cap off, and you can see inside there is just kind of a sea of rust and corrosion. And so this little rubber O-ring here, which is supposed to stop water getting in, it no worky. So this windlass no worky when it looks like that. And remember, this is after 10.5 months of being on the boat. I came back across the Atlantic, arrived in the Azores, and put the anchor down, because I do that manually, and then when I went to lift it, it just would not work. So that's what she looks like. I am, as Lofrans have requested, going to send it off to them so that they can inspect it. It's just a shame I had to have a bit of an argument with them before they decided to send me a new motor. I think I'm going to put the cap back on, and then I can remove the motor itself, hopefully. I think it kind of went that way around. Now, in theory, move that out of the way. In theory, I'll just undo these nuts on the top here. Oh, I can pull it out. Now they do nicely put lock nuts on here, but they're not so tight that I actually need 2 spanners to get them off. Annoyingly, I've lost my 10mm ratchet spanner, which are great, so I'll have to buy a new one. Ratchet spanners really changed the way I do things. I'm not talking about socket set spanners, I'm talking about ratchet spanners which go. They're a big time saver. That, another washer there, probably another washer there. Oh, look at that. There she is. So the top's clearly gotten wet as well. As you can see, the amount of aluminium corrosion just on there. So I mean, that's not a big surprise really. clean that up, chuck a new one in, and then it can go back in the boat. Before I do any of that, I think removing the rest of this sealant would be a fairly good idea. What we can do is just kind of rub that carefully over the surface. Because the surface has been machined flat, I can do that without scratching the anodizing. So much sealant on here, some of this is the sealant from the previous windlass that is pulled off. So yeah, to Lofrans, who one of their reasons they said my windlass failed is because I put inadequate sealant on. Well, you know what? I'm cleaning off all that inadequate sealant because, you know, it was so inadequate. There wasn't any on here. Sorry, Lofrans. I'm not a big fan of yours at the moment. If you stand by your products, you stand by your products. You shouldn't have to have a fight with a supplier of something when it goes wrong. But I suppose they did eventually send me a motor. Eventually. And it was technically out of warranty, but arguably it wasn't fit for purpose, so maybe I was just unlucky and got one that was made on a Friday afternoon and someone didn't seat the bottom piece correctly. Now I do have at least 2 windlasses to fit this winter to Contessa's. I'm going to have to think carefully about what to suggest. I think it was a Lofrans, or is it a Lumar X2 I fitted quite recently. As far as I know, that's working well. There. I'm going to call that good enough. In there with a bit of WD-40. Right, now, once I've got all this in, I'm going to clean this up with acetone just to remove any kind of grease or anything on there, so that the new sealant will stick. But before I stick the new motor in, that clearly had a little bit of grease on it. Calcium sulfonate grease this is. So this is Lumar's kind of expensive grease. You line little tubes. Put a little bit on here as well, so that in the unfortunate circumstance I have to get this out again, and hopefully it won't fight me. I'm going to chuck some around there because why not? That helps stop water getting in. Then no harm in that at all. Right, greasy fingers. Right, there's a little key on there that needs to locate in there. This is going to be the difficult bit because I'm going to have to turn that. So Sorry YouTube, this I've got to have it facing me so I can work out what the angle needs to be. There. It is located. So all I need to do now is got little nylon washers. The reason you have nylon washers is to insulate the stainless steel nuts from the aluminium casing, because they are dissimilar metals, and if against each other in with an electrolyte like seawater, they kind of make a battery and fizz against each other. Fizz is the technical term. One will corrode the other. So same on the other side. Put the nylon washer on. I'm going to put the first nut on loosely. Don't want to wrench these down too tight, because in fact, you know what, I've just realised I'm missing underneath this, just so you don't ruin the nylon washer. On top of the nylon washer there is just a plain stainless washer. There's also a little split washer as well. Although I've never been convinced by having a split washer on top of a plain washer on top of a nylon washer, because the idea of the split washer is that it stops the nut from vibrating loose, but it then needs to grip on the two things that are next to it. So it needs to grip on one side against the nut and on the other side against the washer, but that washer could spin. So what's to stop the nut and the vibration washer, or the split washer, from just unscrewing anyway? But anyway, who am I to guess on the logic of that? But it makes more sense to me that there is it would make more sense to me if it was just the split washer, but then it would be going against the nylon washer. So I guess that's possibly why they use two nuts as well, because then you can do it up with the lower nut, and then you tighten up the top nut against the lower nut, lock them together, and in theory that won't come apart. It's a good theory. And now we can put the little dome nuts on top. The way you tighten up your lock nuts, you get one on there, and then you tighten that one up against it. Same on the other side. Job's a good one. So the last thing I'm going to do, I do some sealenting. So I'm just going to grab some acetone and just clean off these surfaces, which will get sealed to the deck. But also, I'm just going to wipe around the motor there, and you shouldn't have to do this, but because of my experience I'm going to run a really small bead of sealant around that bottom cap. We're going to see what I've got in the van. Silicone would be perfect because it's easy enough to pull off, but because I don't normally use silicone, I may not have any. I couldn't find any silicone, and I'm not going to buy any just to do this, because I only need a tiny amount. So I've got some alternative sealant, and all I'm going to do is run a really small bead. In fact, let's just clear the nozzle. It's a brand new tube this, so it should be alright, but just because the stuff at the top sometimes gets a little bit gloopy. So all the way around, and then if I refit this in a couple of hours, this sealant should have gone off by then. Right round with a little finger. And then I'll put a little bit, just a little bit around this cap here. I only want to put a tiny amount on because you need to be able to remove this cap, so it's going to be the littlest smear in the world. Just around. The other way around. Well, if you are one of the 3 people that are still watching this, congratulations. I'm not saying you should reevaluate your life, but I'm sure there's something more interesting on YouTube, like one of my other videos when I fix something far more interesting. But if you have been watching, thank you very much. Well, there we go. It's in a state where I can now refit this onto the boat. I've run some sealant around the top, around the bottom cap, so hopefully that will be a little bit more waterproof than it was previously. I quite enjoy doing boat works, but I do find it really annoying having to do things because stuff has failed well before it should have done. So you know, to give them their due, Lofrans did eventually send me a replacement motor. It's just a shame I had to have a bit of an argument with them before they would do it, because it should not have failed after 10.5 months use, even though it was technically out of warranty. So so thank you, Lofrans, but sort of, you know, maybe be a bit more helpful next time. It would be nice. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.